Brooke Carter never thought her strength would be tested in such a cold, calculated way. One quiet afternoon in her Charlotte penthouse, sunlight warming the room where her triplets slept, she opened her front door to find two members of her husband's wealthy family waiting with stiff smiles and polished confidence. They didn't ask how she was doing. They didn't check on the babies. They walked in as if the home belonged to them and set a briefcase on her dining table with a dull, final thud. Brooke stood still, her heart steady, her breath controlled. She had felt their disapproval long before that moment, felt it in their clipped greetings, in their tight expressions at galas, in the way they assessed her background like it was a flaw instead of a foundation. But this was new. This was bold. With emotion so casual it felt rehearsed, Louis's older brother clicked open the metal case. Stacks of crisp bills lined the interior, arranged perfectly, almost too neatly. $4 million in cash. Not a gift, not a blessing, not help. A payment, a price, placed on her dignity and her motherhood. Brooke. His voice had a smoothness that didn't match the cruelty of the offer. This will give you a clean start. Take the triplets, walk away quietly, and allow Louis to move forward with someone suited for his world. Someone who understands the responsibility of being a Wesley. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Her hands stayed calm at her sides. Because at that moment, everything became painfully clear. They weren't trying to support her. They weren't trying to protect the babies. They were trying to erase her and use her own children as the tool to do it. The nerve, the arrogance, the audacity to believe she would fold. But Brooke Carter was raised by women who knew how to stand tall even when people tried to shrink them. She came from a community where worth wasn't measured in bank accounts but in integrity, courage, and the way you showed up for the people you loved. So she closed the briefcase softly, not angrily, not dramatically, just decisively. And with a steady, unwavering voice she said, "You came here thinking I would disappear. You came here believing I could be bought, like I don't know myself, my value, or my place in this family. But you're wrong. They didn't know it yet, but that moment wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of a transformation that would expose every false smile, every quiet insult, and every buried intention his family had ever held toward her. And it all started with a briefcase full of money she never asked for, never needed, and would never accept. It doesn't matter how gentle your spirit is, how hard you try to be kind, or how genuine your intentions are, some people will still treat you like a guest in your own life. Brooke Carter had given everything she had to her new world. She learned how to dress for galas without losing her style. She learned how to walk through marble-floored estates without shrinking. She smiled when people gave her half-hearted greetings. She held back tears when her joy was met with judgment. All she wanted was to be loved as she loved, deeply, fully, without games. But the world she married into didn't work that way. The Wesley name was a currency all on its own. Brooke had married into a legacy that came with its own rules, and none of those rules had room for a woman. From the south side of Charlotte, who still called her grandmother Big Mama and cried during Sunday worship, she wasn't raised to chase wealth. She was raised to build people, to nurture, to forgive, to speak truth even when her voice shook. But no matter how many dinners she helped cook, no matter how respectfully she smiled at the boardroom, wives, no matter how hard she tried to carry herself with quiet dignity, it was never enough. She was never quite enough, not refined enough, not connected enough. Not one of them, even after she carried 3 lives in her body for 9 months, even after she gave birth to triplets and still managed to host family brunches with a baby on each hip, even after she smiled through public appearances where they only mentioned Louis in the press. They still made her feel like a placeholder, a bridge Louis had temporarily crossed but never intended to build with. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't broken. She was awake. There are wounds people don't see because they wear expensive clothes and host pretty dinners. But Brooke learned to recognize silent rejection, the kind that doesn't come in arguments, but in polite dismissal, the kind that tells you, "We see you, we just don't value you." She'd been in rooms where her name wasn't remembered, even as she passed hors d'oeuvres. She'd spoken at charity events only to be overshadowed by a Wesley cousin who had never even met the children she was raising. And through all of that, Brooke stayed kind. She stayed grounded. She stayed graceful. Because her worth wasn't up for their negotiation. Still, there were nights she cried silently in the nursery, holding River while watching Jacer and Avery sleep, wondering if love was enough when the world you entered had already made its verdict about you, not because you weren't good, but because you weren't theirs. Have you ever been in that place, where you show up with full heart and get met with empty stares? Where every word you speak is measured, weighed, and quietly disqualified? Where your joy becomes a threat to someone else's control? That's what Brooke lived through, not for days or weeks, but for years. Until one day, they made a mistake. They assumed she was still seeking their approval. They assumed she was still that quiet girl trying to fit in. They assumed she wouldn't fight back, because she never raised her voice. But what they forgot was this: you don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to belong to their world to define your own. And when a mother is cornered, not just for herself, but for her children, that's when everything changes. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong, even when you gave your all? Comment below. I want to hear your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because Brooke's story, it's just getting started. Some families protect their legacy with loyalty. Others protect it with silence. But the Wesleys? They protected theirs with strategy. Cold, polished, calculated strategy. Behind their elegant mansion gates and high-rise offices, their influence stretched like a shadow over every decision Louis made. They moved as a collective, spoke as a unit, and believed their name carried the weight of royalty. To them, anyone outside their circle didn't just lack status, they lacked purpose. Brooke wasn't the wife they wanted for him. She didn't come from old money. She didn't grow up attending private academies. She didn't know the hidden social codes that governed charity galas and exclusive clubs. To them, she was temporary, a lovely distraction, a warm smile Louis would eventually outgrow, but Louis didn't treat her that way. He loved her. He chose her. He built a home and a future with her. And that, more than anything, challenged the family's carefully structured world. Because love is unpredictable. Love doesn't ask for permission. Love doesn't follow family blueprints. Brooke's presence forced them to face a truth none of them dared to say out loud. She changed Louis. She grounded him. She made him softer, calmer, more human. But instead of celebrating that, the family saw it as a threat, a diversion, a disruption to the image they worked so hard to preserve. So they decided she had to go. Not publicly, because that would create questions. Not loudly, because that would damage their reputation. No, quietly, cleanly, conveniently. The plan was simple. Remove Brooke. Control the narrative. Rewrite history. Because in their eyes, if Brooke raised the triplets alone, she wouldn't just disappear. From their world, she would carry the burden of being the one who walked away. They would remain untarnished. Louis would be seen as the noble father abandoned by a woman who couldn't handle the pressure. Their legacy would stay intact. That was the plan. But Brooke Carter wasn't the woman they thought she was. She wasn't intimidated by marble floors or gold-trimmed invitations. She wasn't impressed by their titles or their wealth. She didn't care about their approval, and she definitely wasn't afraid of their opinions. She had faced harder things in her life than their polished rejection. She had known struggle. She had known loss. She had known how to stretch one meal into two when money was tight growing up. She had known how to pray through nights that felt like storms. So when they tried to erase her, she didn't run. She didn't panic. She stood still, and she thought, that's what they never understood. Some women fight with volume. Some fight with anger. Brooke fought with clarity, with patience, with strategy they never saw coming. The moment they opened that briefcase, they believed they had the upper hand. They believed Brooke would crumble under pressure. They believed money was enough to shake her foundation. But Brooke had something they didn't, a reason to fight. 3 reasons, to be exact. River, Jacer, Avery. Her babies weren't bargaining chips. They weren't props for a wealthy dynasty. They were her purpose, her heart outside her body, her future, and a woman fighting for her children. That is a force no amount of money can buy and no amount of privilege can suppress. Her husband's family walked into that penthouse, assuming the story was already written. But Brooke Carter was about to rewrite every single chapter. This wasn't just about pride. It wasn't about proving she was strong. It was about rewriting a legacy that had been built on exclusion and letting the world see what true strength looked like when it walked into a room wearing grace, holding her babies and refusing to fold. Because when Brooke Carter stood over that briefcase, staring at the money they thought would make her vanish, she saw the entire game they were trying to play. They weren't just trying to buy her silence. They were trying to shape the future narrative of who their family was. They wanted her out so they could craft a cleaner version of their empire, one that erased every uncomfortable truth she represented. But what they didn't expect was for her to already be prepared. Long before they ever slid that briefcase across her table, Brooke had started noticing patterns. Whispers at events, comments made in passing, backhanded compliments that cut deeper than insults. She hadn't responded. Not with words. She'd responded by remembering, by documenting, by recording. Her baby monitor? It wasn't just for keeping an eye on the triplets. It was also recording that exact moment, the offer, the insult, the $4 million bribe, every message they sent, every conversation they had behind closed doors, every ounce of manipulation. She had all of it, not to get revenge, but to protect the truth, because that's what powerful women do. They don't destroy, they expose. And that moment was coming, sooner than anyone expected. You're probably wondering, did she take the evidence to the media? Did she file a lawsuit? Did she go public with the footage? No. That's not Brooke's way. She called Louis, not to beg, not to threaten, just to tell him the truth. And what he did next, it didn't just shock his family. It shattered the very foundation of their dynasty. So stay with me, because what started as a bribe ended as a public reckoning. And the woman they tried to erase, she didn't just walk away. She stood taller. She changed everything. This is the story of how Brooke Carter, a mother of 3, turned $1 billion family on its head, without screaming, without drama, and without losing herself. What came next? Let's just say, the briefcase wasn't the only thing she returned. If someone tried to buy your silence with money, would you take it, or stand your ground? Tell me in the comments, and if this story already has you hooked, hit that like and subscribe, because we're just getting started. Brooke Carter was born on the south side of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a neighborhood where you could borrow sugar from your next-door neighbor and still get fussed at by somebody else's grandma if you ran through her flower beds. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that mattered more than anything. Her mama, Denise, raised her with a firm voice and a soft heart. She taught her how to walk with pride without stepping on anyone else. Dignity, Denise would say, ain't about what you wear, baby. It's about how you treat people when you think nobody's watching. And Brooke, she watched everything. She remembered the way her grandmother could braid a child's hair without pulling their edges. She remembered how her Uncle Dre could turn a Sunday barbecue into a neighborhood event. And she remembered how her cousins would take turns watching each other's kids when one mama needed a nap. There was no wealth in their community, not in bank accounts, but the richness of love, support, and soul was impossible to ignore. Brooke grew up in that soil, and from it, she bloomed. She was the type of girl who held on to dreams like they were sacred. Since she was 12, Brooke wanted to become a neonatal nurse. There was something about fragile life, the kind that needed cradling, warmth, and strength, that drew her in. She didn't want to be in the spotlight. She wanted to be the steady hands holding life together when the world was falling apart. She worked after school at a local pharmacy to help out with bills. She babysat for neighbors and saved up every dollar toward her nursing school application fees. She studied hard, avoided distractions, and never let the noise around her drown out her focus. Church taught her faith. Family taught her boundaries. Life taught her balance. And in all that, she learned something that would carry her far. You can be kind and clear. You can love people and protect your peace. And no matter how high somebody else's ladder is, you don't have to climb it to prove you're worthy. She didn't chase attention. She chased purpose. She wasn't raised to impress. She was raised to impact. Brooke Carter wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but she was always listening, always absorbing, always ready to love, work, and fight for what mattered. And one day, her world would collide with one that looked nothing like hers, but needed someone like her more than it ever knew. Lewis Wesley didn't just grow up wealthy. He grew up insulated. His family owned the kind of legacy that made introductions unnecessary. From real estate ventures to cutting-edge tech infrastructure, the Wesley name was synonymous with power in high-rise boardrooms and across glossy magazine pages. He went to private schools with ceilings taller than most people's homes, learned to navigate mergers before he could legally drive, was trained to smile on cue, shake hands strategically, and date women who matched the brand. But despite the luxury, Louis was alone. Deeply, constantly, quietly alone. People surrounded him, investors, assistants, advisors, but few really saw him. They saw the last name. They saw the fortune. They saw a future CEO groomed since birth. What they didn't see was the man who longed for something real. He dated women his family introduced him to, socialites, influencers, heiresses, women who sparkled in ballrooms but disappeared when the cameras were off. The relationships were transactional, muted, predictable. Louis smiled through it all, but in private, the silence of his penthouse echoed louder than applause at his product launches. The bigger the empire grew, the emptier his evenings became. His life was always on display, but never truly shared. He funded wings of hospitals he never visited, donated to causes that never touched his soul, until one day, one unexpected, ordinary day, he walked into a children's hospital wing his family had helped build, and saw her. The ribbon-cutting event wasn't supposed to mean anything to Louis. He showed up out of obligation, not inspiration. His mother had arranged the press. His assistant had organized the speech. All he had to do was smile and hold the scissors. But the moment he stepped inside the neonatal unit, his eyes landed on Brooke. She wasn't wearing designer shoes. Her nails weren't professionally done. She wore soft scrubs and a name tag. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her focus wasn't on the cameras. It was on a fussy newborn she cradled gently, whispering something so sweet it quieted the child instantly. She didn't look up when Louis walked in. She didn't rush over or introduce herself. She just kept folding blankets, humming softly, tending to the babies like they were treasures instead of patients. That's what made him notice her, not the way she looked, but the way she cared. When their eyes finally met, Brooke gave him a polite smile. Nothing more, nothing less. She didn't stumble over her words. She didn't compliment his suit. She didn't mention his last name. She said, "You're standing in front of the wipes. Could you pass them, please?" Louis blinked, then chuckled. Sure." He handed them over like a student caught off guard in class. That moment did something to him. Over the next few hours, he watched her, quietly, carefully. She moved with purpose. She spoke with kindness. She asked questions that showed she wanted to understand, not impress. By the time the media left and the balloons deflated, Louis found himself lingering by the break-room doorway. Brooke saw him and tilted her head. "You're still here?" He nodded. "Yeah. It's peaceful in here." Brooke chuckled. "If by peaceful you mean crying babies, yes. That's our kind of peace." He smiled. "What's your name?" She hesitated, not out of shyness, but out of healthy caution. "Brooke. Brooke Carter." "Louis," he replied. "I know," she said, folding another blanket. "You're the ribbon guy." That was the beginning. Not love at first sight, but respect at first truth. And that, for both of them, was more valuable than any spark. Louis didn't ask her out immediately. He waited. He visited again, He donated quietly, not with checks, but with blankets, preemie diapers and incubators. He asked questions about the work, real questions. Brooke noticed. Eventually he asked her out. Dinner. Nothing extravagant. No press. No black car. Just two people in a quiet restaurant where she could talk without being overshadowed by flashbulbs or family expectations. Brooke was hesitant. Not because she wasn't interested, because she was. But their worlds were too far apart. His came with noise. Hers thrived in peace. But Louis never tried to drag her into his world. He met her in hers. They'd go for walks, sit on her porch with lemonade. He'd listen to her stories about growing up on the South Side, about her dreams, about how she once helped deliver a baby in an elevator because the hospital doors jammed. He wasn't fascinated by her background. He was humbled by it. Brooke didn't just survive. She led, loved, and healed. One night, after visiting her mama's house for Sunday dinner, Louis looked at Brooke under the kitchen light and said softly, "I want to know your world, not visit it, know it, be part of it." That was the night she let herself fall. A few months later, they married quietly. No cameras, no guest list over 50, just a courthouse, her mama crying, and a man who kissed her like he found what he didn't know he needed. No headlines needed. They didn't need the world's approval. They had each other. But while Louis loved her, his family never did. The first official family gathering Brooke attended as Mrs. Louis Wesley was a charity gala hosted at the Wesley estate. The air smelled like imported roses and aged wine. The room sparkled, not from warmth, but from diamonds, tension, and generations of quiet judgment dressed in couture. Brooke wore a soft emerald gown that hugged her form modestly, her hair styled by a cousin's friend from Charlotte. She stood by Louis's side, smiling, making polite conversation, asking questions, listening intently. But it didn't take long before the warmth she offered was returned in whispers and glances. A woman near the bar said, "Oh, she's lovely, she has a calm presence." Another chimed in, very grounded, "I suppose she must be, coming from where she comes from." It wasn't what they said. It was how they said it. The language was carefully polished, but the intent was cold steel. She wasn't just new to their circle, she was an intrusion into it. Louis stood beside her proudly, oblivious to the coded undertones. He'd introduce her with ease. "My wife, Brooke. The woman who keeps me sane." But Brooke noticed how some of them would only smile with their lips. How the conversation would end quickly after the introductions. How the men would look her over like she was a wine label they didn't recognize. She remembered one moment especially, at a family dinner. His mother, Celeste Wesley, poured her a glass of water and said, "Do you feel overwhelmed by all this? It must be quite a transition, culturally." Brooke didn't flinch. She simply smiled and replied, "Hospital rooms don't care how much money you make, and that's where I spend most of my time." Celeste gave a tight smile. Brooke held her gaze, unbothered. These were the kinds of battles Brooke knew well, where the war wasn't loud, but subtle, where love wasn't offered, only tolerated, and where a woman had to decide whether to shrink to be accepted or stand taller to be respected. She chose the latter, every time. 2 pink lines. That's how it started. Brooke stood barefoot in the bathroom of their penthouse, staring down at the pregnancy test. She blinked, held her breath, exhaled slowly. She had suspected it. Her body felt different, but seeing confirmation turned her limbs to jelly. She waited until dinner to tell Louis. He had just returned from a speaking engagement in San Francisco, still shaking. Off jet lag, sipping chamomile tea when she slid the test across the table. He blinked at it, paused, then looked up slowly. "You're—" She nodded. His chair scraped back as he stood and crossed the room. He didn't ask questions. He didn't overreact. He just wrapped her in a hug so strong and safe that she felt her knees weaken. That night, he danced with her in the kitchen like they were in high school. No music, no rhythm, just 2 people high on joy. A week later, they had their first ultrasound. Brooke lay still on the exam table, nervous. The nurse's eyes widened. "Oh, okay. Well, Mama," she said with a grin, "you've got 3 little heartbeats in there." Brooke sat up slightly. 3 triplets. Louis's hand tightened around hers. Then he started laughing, hard, surprised, overwhelmed with joy. Brooke's eyes welled with tears. Not fear, not sadness, just awe. 3 lives, 3 gifts, 3 pieces of her heart growing inside her at once. They named them before they were even born: River, the calm one; Jacer, the thinker; Avery, the connector. Louis wanted to paint the nursery himself. Brooke let him. He spilled paint, cursed and laughed about it. They stayed up talking about strollers, diaper brands, and what it would be like to be outnumbered in their own home. It felt magical, until his family found out. When the news of Brooke's pregnancy reached the Wesley family, it didn't spark the excitement it should have. They didn't send flowers. They didn't throw a celebration. They didn't even offer congratulations. Instead, Brooke received a phone call from Louis's aunt, Margot. "Well, dear, that's certainly unexpected," she said, after a pause too long to be polite. "Triplets, you say? My. That's going to be quite a story for the papers, isn't it?" Brooke's stomach twisted. Over the following days, the silence grew louder. At a family brunch, Celeste finally addressed it, coldly, directly. "This family carries responsibility with every birth. The Wesley children are heirs, not just babies. Have you considered the optics?" Brooke blinked. "They're not optics. They're human beings. Our children—" Celeste's expression didn't change. "And they'll need a certain image." Louis stepped in then, protective. "Mom, we're not having this conversation." But Brooke had already heard enough. The family didn't see her pregnancy as a miracle. They saw it as a complication, a PR risk, a headline that couldn't be managed easily. Worse, they began suggesting that the timing of the pregnancy seemed convenient. She marries you quietly, then immediately announces she's expecting 3? One cousin whispered at a charity event. Brooke caught it. She always did. And while Louis defended her every time, she could feel the pressure building. They saw her as someone who had secured her place, not as a woman in love, not as a mother preparing for the most intense journey of her life, but as a calculated outsider who now had a grip on the family future. Louis called it nonsense, but Brooke, she felt it like cold air under the door. Still, she smiled. Still, she kept planning for the babies. Because love wasn't just what you felt, it was what you protected. While the Wesleys withdrew, Brooke's people showed up. Her aunt Yolanda drove up from Charlotte with trays of sweet potato casserole and greens. Her cousins brought onesies and loud stories. Her childhood friend Tamra decorated the nursery with hand-painted signs, triplets equal to triple blessings. Their penthouse, once quiet and pristine, filled with the scent of cornbread, the sound of laughter, and the warmth of people who didn't care about brands or legacy, only love. But with each passing day, Brooke noticed the gap widening between her world and the one she had married into. The estate became colder. More visits were rescheduled. Family group chats excluded her. The women she once greeted with grace now offered shallow nods. She wasn't just being ignored, she was being edged out. Yet the love she felt from her own roots grew louder, stronger. Her mother called every morning. The women from her church mailed handwritten prayers. The nurse staff at the hospital rallied around her, prepping her favorite room for when labor came. Brooke didn't feel broken. She felt chosen. Chosen to carry life. Chosen to raise it with love. Chosen to break a cycle of coldness and show her children something warmer. She told Louis one night, "I may be lonely in your house sometimes, but I'm never alone in this journey, not with these babies, and not with the people who raised me." He held her then, quietly, still loving her, still blind to the way his family was building walls she never asked for. But Brooke, she wasn't worried, because she knew who she was, and when the time came, she'd remind them, not with a fight, but with truth and proof. Brooke's pregnancy was a journey of both awe and exhaustion. By her 7th month, her walk became a slow sway, her breaths heavier, her cravings unpredictable. Louis tried everything to make her comfortable. Foot rubs, midnight fruit runs, soft music whispering through the penthouse. He was present in every way a husband should be. But the day everything changed happened at 4:22 in the morning. Brooke woke with a sharp ache. Not the kind that came and went, the kind that demanded attention. She nudged Louis, whispering, "It's time." Louis practically levitated out of bed. He called her doctor, grabbed the hospital bags, and escorted her to the car, one hand under her belly, the other gripping her overnight bag. At the hospital, nurses greeted her with warm smiles. They knew Brooke. She had volunteered there for years, folding blankets, comforting newborns, praying silently for families she didn't know by name. Now she was the one being wheeled in. Hours passed. Contractions grew stronger. Brooke breathed through each one, sweat on her forehead, determination in her eyes. Louis held her hand and kissed her knuckles. "I'm here," he whispered. Every second. At 9:14 a.m., River entered the world. At 9:16, Jason followed. At 9:18, Avery completed their trio. 3 tiny miracles, each under 5 pounds. Their cries filled the room, thin, soft, but strong enough to pull tears from Brooke's eyes. Louis didn't even try to hide his emotions. He pressed his forehead against hers, whispering, "You did it. You actually did it. Brooke, they're beautiful." Nurses wrapped each baby in warm blankets, placing them gently in Brooke's arms. She stared at them with a love so deep she couldn't speak. Their skin was soft as peach fuzz, their fingers no bigger than grain, yet their presence filled every corner of her being. River, the quiet one, blinked up slowly. Jason, alert and fussy, gripped Brooke's finger. Avery, soft and peaceful, rested his cheek against her chest. Brooke cried softly, overwhelmed by gratitude. She kissed each forehead, whispering blessings over their tiny frames. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life, and in her heart it absolutely was. But outside that hospital room, the world she married into felt colder than ever. Louis called his family immediately with the news. His voice was warm, bright, alive in a way Brooke rarely saw around them. "Mom, they're here. River, Jason, and Avery. They're healthy. Brooke is doing amazing." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a long one. Celeste finally replied, "Oh, that's quite something. Triplets. Well, we'll come by when we can." No congratulations. No joy. No questions about Brooke's well-being. Louis's jaw tightened, but he didn't tell Brooke the tone he heard. He didn't want to cloud the moment, but Brooke felt it anyway. Hours passed. Visitors came. Nurses brought flowers. Friends from her volunteer days hugged her. Her mother arrived in tears. Her aunties carried food in styrofoam containers. Still, no Wesley family. Brooke didn't expect gifts or applause. But she expected something, even a simple acknowledgement of 3 new lives connected to their bloodline. Late afternoon, a nurse stepped in and said softly, "Mrs. Wesley, there are 2 visitors asking for your husband in the hall." Brooke's heart flickered with hope, but those hopes dimmed quickly. Celeste Wesley and Louis's older brother, Grant, entered the room with stiff expressions and polite smiles that barely lifted their cheeks. Celeste approached the baby's bassinets, peered inside, and simply murmured, "They're small." Brooke blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. Grant added, "Premature births are quite common in multiples. I suppose it's expected." "Not they're beautiful. Not congratulations. Just cold observation." Brooke held her sons closer. Celeste placed a hand on Louis's arm. "We need to discuss arrangements, dear. Their future, their upbringing, their image." Brooke stiffened. Louis stepped in front of his mother. "Not today. Not now." Celeste's lips tightened before she stepped back slightly. "Of course, we'll let you rest." But there was no warmth in her tone. No affection toward her grandchildren. Just detachment. When the door closed behind them, Brooke leaned back against her pillows, heart heavy. The silence they brought with them was louder than their words. Louis sat on the edge of her bed. "I'm sorry." Brooke shook her head, brushing her fingers against River's cheek. "No, baby, don't apologize. They chose their place in this story. I'll choose mine." Her words weren't bitter. They were accepting, resolute. She had created life, 3 lives, and no cold shoulder could dim that light. A few months after the triplets' birth, the Wesley family hosted a large charity gala. Louis insisted on Brooke staying home if she wasn't ready, but she wanted to accompany him. She wanted to show the world their family, even if the family behind closed doors didn't fully welcome her. Brooke wore a deep navy gown, her hair styled simply, beauty glowing softly from new motherhood. Louis couldn't take his eyes off her. He held her hand tightly as they walked through the entrance. The cameras clicked. Reporters shouted, "Louis, over here. Is this your wife?" "Mrs. Wesley, a photo, please." For a moment, the attention felt overwhelming. But Louis whispered, "I've got you," and Brooke breathed easier. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The moment people realized who she was, conversations grew quieter, smiles grew tighter. She heard her introduction several times. "This is Mrs. Wesley, not Brooke, not Louis's wife, Brooke Carter. Just a title, a role, a placeholder." Women in designer gowns nodded politely but kept their distance. They asked her surface-level questions, where she bought her dress, how she handled triplets, whether she felt adjusted yet. Not one asked about her dreams, her background, her work, her heart, but they asked Louis everything, about the next tech rollout, his company's expansion, his investments. Brooke stood beside him, smiling gently, but she felt the invisible wall between her and them. At one point, a wealthy donor leaned in and told Louis, "Your wife seems sweet, quiet, a good balance for your position." Brooke heard it. She turned and met the woman's eyes with calm clarity. "I speak when it's meaningful," she said softly. "Stillness doesn't mean silence." The woman blinked, taken aback. Louis squeezed Brooke's hand, pride shining in his eyes. Despite her grace, the message was clear. She was present but not accepted, visible but not valued. Still, Brooke didn't shrink. She listened, observed, learned. Every room taught her something about the world she married into, and she was becoming fluent in a language built on judgment, hierarchy, and image. A language she had no intention of speaking back. Brooke never entered marriage expecting conflict. She wasn't spiteful. She didn't hold grudges. She believed in second chances, but she also believed in truth. And lately, the truth was showing up in subtle ways. Comments overheard, messages sent indirectly, small gestures meant to remind her she wasn't fully welcomed. So she did something quietly powerful. She kept record, not revengefully, not angrily, just intentionally. A text message from a cousin of Louis's complaining that 3 babies at once might look excessive in the press. A voicemail from an aunt suggesting Brooke take a step back from public events to avoid overshadowing the family legacy. A conversation caught on her phone, accidentally recording while sitting. In her purse, voices discussing whether Brooke fit the lifestyle. She saved them all. She didn't show Louis, not yet, because she didn't want to stress him during the early months of fatherhood. She wanted him to enjoy River's sleepy smiles, Jase's curious eyes, Avery's cuddly nature. But she also wouldn't let anyone rewrite history later, not when the slights were real, not when intentions were clear. At home she journaled, dates, events, notes, not out of paranoia, but out of protection. One afternoon, Celeste visited unexpectedly. Brooke offered her tea. Celeste declined. Instead, she walked around the nursery, lifting her chin. 3 babies is a lot for someone with your background, she murmured. Brooke smiled softly. Love doesn't come with a manual. I'll learn as I go. Celeste frowned as if that answer disappointed her. Brooke didn't argue. She simply wrote it down later. She wasn't gathering ammunition. She was building clarity, because she knew something his family didn't. If you ever need to defend yourself, truth is your greatest shield. And one day, not today, not tomorrow. Those small slights would matter, not for vengeance, but for vindication. Brooke wasn't preparing for a battle. She was preparing for understanding. And soon, the Wesley family would realize that the woman they underestimated was far more perceptive, steady, and prepared than they ever gave her credit for. The morning Louis left for Seattle was calm. The triplets had just drifted back to sleep after an early feeding, their tiny chests rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Brooke had just settled them into their cribs when Louis kissed her forehead and promised to be back in 2 days. He'd been invited to speak at a leadership summit, and though he offered to skip it, Brooke insisted he go. "You've worked hard for this, and they'll be in good hands," she said, gently swaying Jaser. "Go. Represent. Come home." Louis lingered a little longer than usual, rubbing River's back, humming something low to Avery before finally heading out. He hated being away, especially now, but trusted Brooke more than anyone in the world. Later that afternoon, the penthouse was quiet. Brooke folded laundry while the baby monitor glowed on the side table. She moved in soft rhythms, matching socks, organizing onesies by size, humming church tunes under her breath. A knock came at the door just before noon. Brooke wiped her hands on a towel, glancing through the peephole. It was Celeste and Grant. No call. No message. Just there. She hesitated, then opened the door. "Brooke," Celeste greeted, voice tight. "We thought we'd stop by and check on the children." Brooke blinked. "They're asleep. But come in, if you'd like." They entered without waiting for the full invitation. Grant carried a leather briefcase. Brooke noticed the way he held it, with care, like it wasn't empty. They didn't sit. They didn't ask how she was. They didn't ask about the babies. Instead, Celeste walked to the windows, staring out across the skyline. Grant placed the briefcase on the dining table. The air shifted. "Brooke," Celeste began, her tone cool and rehearsed. "We've come to discuss the future of the children, their security, their upbringing, the family's role." Brooke crossed her arms lightly. "Their future is with their parents. What's the issue?" Grant opened the briefcase. Stacks of money, neatly aligned, unmistakable, stared back at her. $2 million. Brooke's body went still. Grant spoke next. "This offer is more than generous, enough to give you freedom, comfort, a future where you can raise them on your terms. And Louis can move forward on his." The insult was wrapped in politeness, but the meaning couldn't have been clearer. They weren't asking her to co-parent. They weren't asking her to consider the children's needs. They were buying her out. Brooke stared at the open briefcase, her heart calm but her chest tightening with each passing second. $2 million. Not for the children's future. Not for a college fund. Not for support. For her exit. "Let me get this straight," she said slowly, her voice even. "You want me to take the triplets, walk away from my marriage, and let the public believe that I left Louis?" Grant didn't blink. "You'll receive full custody. There will be no legal battle. The Wesley name remains intact. You're free to return to your former life, with more money than you've ever had." Celeste added, "This isn't about punishment, it's about preservation. Our family is under scrutiny. The press has questions. We need a version of events that doesn't invite chaos." Brooke held her breath, staring at both of them like she was seeing them for the first time. "This isn't about the children," she said. "It never was." Grant shifted. "You'll be secure. That's what matters." She laughed. A short, stunned laugh. "Secure?" she repeated. "Do you think money replaces love? Replaces late nights, sick days, lullabies, heartbeats against mine at 2 a.m. They said nothing. Brooke walked slowly to the baby's nursery door and opened it gently. The soft sound of breathing. 3 little ones bundled in warmth and innocence. 3 lives that had no idea their existence was being negotiated in the next room. She turned back. "You think I'll let you write me out of their story?" she said quietly. "Think I'll sign away my place so you can sleep better at night?" Celeste folded her arms. "We're offering a solution. You can either accept it or things will become less civil." Brooke's spine straightened. There it was. The threat beneath the smile. The mask slipping just enough to reveal their intent. Brooke didn't yell. She didn't throw the briefcase. She didn't cry. She simply walked back to the dining table, looked at the open stacks of money, then closed the case gently. Click. A quiet, decisive sound. "You came here expecting desperation," she said softly. "But you've forgotten something." Grant raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I don't need you." Her voice wasn't proud. It wasn't arrogant. It was truth, measured, firm, absolute. "I came into this marriage with love, with peace. I didn't chase your son. He chased me. I didn't ask for access. I made a home, and now, because you can't control me, you're trying to erase me." Celeste stepped forward. "This can still be clean, Brooke. It doesn't have to get messy." Brooke leaned in, just slightly. "It got messy the moment you tried to turn motherhood into a transaction." There was no malice in her tone, only steel wrapped in grace. Grant looked at his watch. "We've said what we came to say." Brooke nodded once. "And I've heard all I need to hear." As they turned to leave, Brooke's hand reached for the baby monitor beside the fruit bowl. She glanced down at the blinking red light, recording every word, every tone, every insult tucked inside polite phrases. They didn't know yet. They would, in time. Because Brooke wasn't loud, but she was never unprepared. The door clicked shut behind them. Brooke stood in silence for a full minute, breathing in, grounding herself. The kind of calm that comes not from surrender, but from decision. She walked to the nursery. River stirred softly. Jason sucked his thumb. Avery curled into his blanket like a heartbeat with legs. Brooke sat in the rocking chair, cradling River gently, her other hand resting on Avery's leg. "You're not pawns," she whispered. "Your purpose." Later that evening, she opened her notebook. She jotted the date, the time, what was said, where they stood, how they moved, every detail recorded. Then she opened her laptop and moved the video file from the baby monitor's memory card to a secure folder. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't shaken. She was ready. An hour later, her phone buzzed. A text from Grant. "We urge you to reconsider. Think of what's best for everyone. This doesn't have to be complicated." Brooke stared at the screen, then typed, "What's best for everyone is telling the truth. And no, I'm not for sale." She hit send, then blocked the number. The next morning, Louis called from Seattle, his voice warm and tired. "Everything okay at home?" he asked. Brooke hesitated for only a second. "No," she said, "but it will be." Her voice didn't shake, because she knew this wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't an offer. This wasn't a test. This was the moment she drew the line. And the people who assumed she would fold were about to learn something vital about Brooke Carter Wesley. She didn't have a price. She had a position, and she wasn't leaving it behind. Not for 2 million, not for any number, not for anyone. Brooke didn't sleep that night. After Celeste and Grant left the penthouse, the weight of what they'd done lingered like a bitter aftertaste. $2 million. A bribe. An insult. She stood by the nursery door, watching River shift slightly in his crib. Avery let out a soft whimper, but settled again. Jason curled against the blanket with both fists tucked under his chin. Brooke's heart stayed steady, but her mind sharpened. They had tried to corner her. They assumed she had no power, no reach, no plan. But what they didn't know was that Brooke had grown up learning how to stay 2 steps ahead of people who thought they were 10 above. She walked back to the living room and stared at the baby monitor. The small digital camera sat silently in its station. It had recorded the entire exchange. The moment Grant set the briefcase on the table, the offer, the veiled threats. Brooke checked the playback. Clear audio. Crystal visuals. She watched herself close the briefcase slowly. Watched her own reaction. Composed, precise, not a single flinch. But it wasn't just the recording that mattered. It was what she'd say with it, if and when she needed to. She copied the video to a secure drive and backed it up on a password-protected cloud account. Then she pulled the monitor closer and rewound to the beginning of the visit, saving the entire session into labeled folders. Later that night, Brooke tested the monitor's settings again, making sure every future interaction in the main room would be recorded with timestamps, multiple audio channels, and duplicate file storage. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about preparation, because if they came back, and something in her gut told her they would, she'd have more than her word. She'd have proof. And Brooke Carter didn't make noise unless it served a purpose. The next time someone tried to erase her, she wouldn't just defend herself. She'd expose the quiet violence of their entitlement. The next morning, Brooke began the second phase of her preparation, collecting patterns. It wasn't new. She'd been noticing things since before the babies were born. Subtle remarks, fractured smiles, emails that said one thing but meant another, messages sent through assistants, events she was accidentally left out of. She never deleted anything. Now, she finally had reason to organize it all. She started with texts, screenshotting threads from Lewis's cousins, her in-laws even, mutual contacts who'd once praised her publicly but questioned her behind closed doors. One message stood out from weeks earlier. 3 babies all at once? Are you sure she didn't plan this to secure her place? Another. You're smart, Lewis. But Brooke, she's clever. Watch her. She created folders, labeled every image file, archived threads in case they were ever deleted from servers. Each message, each whisper typed in haste, became part of her ledger. Next, she opened her email. She filtered through messages from Celeste's secretary, requests that Brooke sit this one out at certain events for the sake of optics. Gentle phrases like, "This dinner may be better attended by those with long-standing ties to the foundation," or, "To avoid distraction from the core guests, we suggest you stay home and rest." Brooke read each line twice, then saved them. On her phone were a handful of old voicemails, most deleted, but a few still untouched. One in particular came from a week after the babies were born. A board member's wife calling her by mistake. "Honestly, I don't know what he sees in her. All those children at once? It's going to be chaos in the media." Celeste is right. She's not a fit for the Wesley image. Click. Saved. Brooke wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. But she was no longer playing polite. She pulled out her journal. Handwritten notes from past conversations, dinners, and family events. She flipped through each page, marking important details with sticky notes. Anything she couldn't record digitally, she documented by hand. Each entry became a thread in a larger web. Truth carefully woven, unshakable. She didn't tell Louis yet. Not because she doubted him, but because when she spoke, it wouldn't be in frustration. It would be with calm clarity, backed by evidence. When the time came, she would show him exactly what had been said in his absence, not to break him, but to show him what had been aimed at his wife and children while he was away. Brooke waited until the triplets were down for their late nap. Sunlight spilled across the nursery floor, painting warm shadows on the carpet. Jason yawned, River wriggled softly in his sleep, and Avery clutched a burp cloth like a treasure. She stepped into the living room, sat on the couch, and picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered over Louis's name for a moment. Then she tapped call. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, baby," he said, voice warm but tired. "Everything okay?" Brooke swallowed gently. "I need to talk to you." The pause on his end was immediate. "What's wrong? Are the babies okay?" "They're fine. They're perfect," she said softly. "It's not them. It's something else." Louis' tone shifted. "You sound off. What happened?" Brooke closed her eyes briefly. "Your mother and brother came to the penthouse." Silence. "When?" he asked. "Yesterday, while you were in Seattle." "What did they say?" His voice was quiet now. "Controlled. They offered me $2 million to leave, to take the triplets and walk away, to disappear, to make it look like I gave up." The silence deepened. Not because he didn't believe her, but because he was processing what he hadn't seen coming. "Louis, you need to come home." His breathing was audible now. "They brought a briefcase," she continued, "sat it right on our table, told me this would solve things quietly, that it was for the best." Louis didn't speak for a long beat. Then, finally, "Did you record it?" Brooke's lips pressed together. The baby monitor caught everything. Audio, video. "I saved it." Another pause. Then Louis whispered, "I'm booking the next flight. I'm on my way. Stay with the babies. Don't answer the door. Don't talk to anyone else in my family until I'm back." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Okay, Brooke." His voice cracked slightly. It was rare, but she heard it. "I'm so sorry," he said. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone." She closed her eyes. "We're not alone. But I need you here. I'll be there by morning." He hung up. And in that moment, Brooke felt a shift, not just in her marriage, but in the story that had been unfolding around her. Because now, someone was finally listening. Louis arrived just after 6 a.m. He didn't wait for coffee. He didn't unpack. He dropped his bag at the door, kissed his babies on the forehead, and sat down in front of Brooke's laptop. "Show me." Brooke had everything ready. The footage, labeled and time-stamped. The briefcase moment, the dialogue, the tone, the calm threat. She pressed play. Louis sat forward, elbows on knees, eyes locked on the screen. He didn't blink much. His jaw tightened. Once, he ran a hand down his face. Twice, he exhaled with a slow shake of the head. But mostly, he said nothing. Not until the end, when Brooke's voice, soft but strong, said, "You're making the biggest assumption of your lives." And Celeste replied, "And what is that?" Brooke's answer came calmly, "That I am for sale." When the video ended, Louis leaned back slowly. Silence. His hands balled into fists on his thighs. Brooke didn't speak. She gave him space. Let the silence do what words couldn't. Finally, he said, "They came into my home, talked to my wife like a problem to be solved, tried to use our children as leverage." His voice wasn't loud, but it held weight. "I knew they didn't approve. I knew they could be cruel, but this—" He shook his head. "This is beyond anything I thought possible." Brooke placed her hand over his. Louis looked at her, really looked. "You stayed calm," he said. "I had to." "For them," she nodded toward the nursery. "And for you," he looked at the laptop again. "I'm not letting this slide." Brooke didn't say thank you. She didn't need to, because this wasn't about gratitude. It was about truth finally being heard. And that changed everything. Louis wasn't a man who made impulsive decisions. He thought before he moved. He planned before he acted. But the morning he watched that recording, the briefcase, the offer, the insulting, calmness in his mother's voice, something inside him snapped cleanly. Not anger, not rage, clarity. He picked up his phone and dialed Grant first. Grant answered with forced confidence. "Back already? We need to discuss." "We'll talk at the estate," Louis said. His tone was clipped, steady. 1 hour. Grant hesitated. "What's this about?" "You know what it's about." Louis didn't give him room to respond. He hung up and called Celeste next. She answered in her cool, polished voice. "Louis, darling, I was going to call you later today. I assume Brooke exaggerated. Estate, 1 hour. All of you." "Louis." He ended the call. He contacted 2 more family members, his uncle, a board member on one of his companies, and an aunt who never missed family meetings. His message to both was simple: mandatory meeting. No excuses. After that, he stepped into the nursery. River blinked up sleepily at him. Jacer stretched with a tiny grunt. Avery slept with one fist curled under his cheek. Louis exhaled, touching each forehead gently. "This ends today," he murmured. When he returned to the living room, Brooke was sitting on the couch with the monitor on the table, the briefcase beside her like a quiet accusation. "You called them?" she asked softly. "Yes." "When?" 45 seconds ago." He sat beside her. Brooke rested her head on his shoulder. "I didn't want to start a war," she whispered. "You didn't," Louis replied. "They did. I'm finishing it." He looked at the briefcase again, his jaw tightening. "They tried to break my family," he said. "They thought they could buy their way out of discomfort, They thought they could remove you like a footnote. Brooke didn't speak. Louis continued. They forgot who I am. They forgot that I stand with you. He paused, turning to her fully. You won't face them alone. Her eyes softened. I know. Louis rose, grabbed the car keys, and held out his hand. Let's go. For the first time since the babies were born, Brooke felt something settle inside her. Not fear, not dread, but power. Her own and her husband's. Today wouldn't be easy. But today would be honest. And honesty was a language she spoke fluently. The drive to the estate was quiet at first. Not tense, just thoughtful. Brooke watched the city roll past the windows, her mind cycling through possibilities, hostility, denial, accusations. She wasn't nervous, but she was cautious. For months, she had been the quiet outsider. Today, she would walk into the Wesley estate with truth in hand. Are you sure you want me there? She finally asked. Louis kept his eyes on the road. You're my wife. That doesn't always matter to them. He reached for her hand. It matters to me. And it matters today. She inhaled deeply. I don't want this to damage you. You didn't do any of this, he said. They did. I'm confronting their actions, not yours. Brooke nodded. Her hesitation wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. She knew how people reacted when their image was threatened. Money made egos fragile, not strong. And the Wesley name had been polished for decades like expensive glass, beautiful, glossy, but easy to crack. The estate's tall iron gates appeared in the distance. A guard buzzed them through. As they drove down the long driveway, Brooke felt a familiar weight. The same feeling she had the first time she'd visited after marrying Louis. The estate was enormous, pristine, intimidating by design. But she wasn't the same woman who walked in months ago. Back then, she wanted approval. Today, she wanted truth to sit on the table where it always should have been. When they parked, Louis turned to her. You hesitate because you care, he said gently. But today, I need you there. Not as a shield, as a witness. Brooke stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, she said. Let's go. Inside, voices murmured in the large marble foyer. Celeste stood beside the staircase, posture stiff, pearls perfectly aligned on her neck. Grant paced with his hands in his pockets. Their uncle sat with arms crossed. Their aunt whispered something under her breath. All eyes shifted to Brooke, not with welcome, with calculation. Celeste forced a polite expression. Brooke Lewis. We weren't expecting, both of you. Brooke's eyes softened but didn't shrink. I'm part of this, she said calmly. So yes, you were. Louis placed a hand at her back, not guiding her, just grounding her. This meeting isn't optional, he told his family. Sit. They sat. Brooke did too. She didn't shake. She didn't shrink. She didn't doubt her place. The only question left was how they would respond when they realized she was no longer someone they could dismiss. Louis stood at the head of the long dining table, the same table where his family planned charity events, business expansions, and holiday dinners. Today, it would become a courtroom of truth. He opened his laptop and connected it to the estate's larger monitor. Celeste frowned. Louis, what is this? Why are you being theatrical? He didn't answer her question. Instead, he looked at Grant. You brought a briefcase to my home. Grant stiffened. It wasn't like that. Louis held up a hand. Let's show everyone what it was like. He pressed play. Celeste's voice filled the room. This offer is more than generous. Enough to give you freedom. Grant's added, you'll receive full custody. There will be no legal battle. Brooke didn't flinch. She watched them instead, watched their eyes dart, watched regret and pride collide in their expressions. The recording continued. We need a version of events that doesn't invite chaos. You're assuming I'm for sale. Louis paused the video. Silence settled over the room, thick and uneasy. His uncle stared in surprise. His aunt covered her mouth. Celeste looked away, jaw clenched. Grant swallowed hard. Louis spoke quietly, which somehow made his words heavier. You came into my home. You talked to my wife like she was disposable. You tried to separate my family for your convenience. Celeste lifted her chin. Louis, you're taking this out of context. There is no context that justifies what you did. Grant tried again. We were trying to protect the image of this family. Louis cut him off sharply. By attempting to dismantle mine. No one responded. Louis gestured toward Brooke. She carried 3 children. She nearly lost her strength in the last month. She loved all of you even when you gave her nothing. And you repaid her with a bribe. Celeste's lips trembled slightly. We made a miscalculation. A miscalculation? Louis repeated. No, you made a decision. One rooted in entitlement and disrespect. He pressed play again, replaying Brooke's final line. You're assuming I'm for sale. The room held its breath. When the video ended, Louis closed the laptop. We're not leaving this room until this is addressed, he said. All of it. The Wesley name had influence, money, and legacy. But today it had something else. Accountability. Brooke stood slowly, her expression poised and controlled. She lifted the briefcase from beside her chair. The latch clicked gently as she opened it, revealing the untouched stacks of cash. She turned it toward the family. This, she said quietly, is what you believed I was worth. Celeste's throat tightened. Brooke, no. Brooke said softly. You spoke. Now, it's my turn. She closed the briefcase and placed it at the center of the table. You wanted me to walk away from my marriage. You wanted me to take my children and vanish so your legacy stayed polished. You didn't offer this money because you cared about us. You offered it to erase inconvenience. Her eyes moved from one face to the next. I'm returning it because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people who made the mistake. Grant's cheeks flushed. We didn't mean... You meant every word, Brooke replied. But here's the part you didn't expect. I'm not leaving. I'm not folding. And I'm not hiding. She took a steady breath. I want a public apology. The room froze. Her aunt blinked. Public? Brooke nodded. You insulted me privately, but you also humiliated me publicly. Every event where I was treated like an accessory, every whisper, every cold smile. Every time you introduced me by his title instead of my name. Louis stepped beside her, pride in his eyes. If they want access to our children again, Brooke continued, they will acknowledge what they did. Not whispered, not quietly, publicly. Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't loud. It was final. Celeste pressed a hand to her temple. Brooke, this could affect the family's image. Brooke lifted her chin. So could bribing a mother to abandon her home. Silence fell. The family realized the truth. They had underestimated her. They thought motherhood made her soft. They thought quiet meant weak. But Brooke Carter Wesley wasn't silent. She was precise. And today, precision cut deeper than anger ever could. Brooke didn't even hear the news first from the lawyers. She heard it from the barista at the local cafe when she walked in. Triplets in tow after their toddler music class. You're trending again, the young woman said quietly, holding out her phone. Brooke froze. The headline blared, Wesley family drama, secret triplets, $4 million offer, and the wife who refused to be bought. Paparazzi, speculation, screenshots of her old social media posts from before she went private, an old family portrait photo from their wedding day splashed across gossip blogs. The world now knew the story, or at least the version the media spun, from leaked court documents and whispers inside the Wesley estate, that a young black mother had refused a multi-million-dollar deal to walk away from, her billionaire husband and his family legacy, with the couple's children. By the time Brooke got home, her front porch had camera flashes blinking through the hedges. Neighbors whispered. Even the grocery delivery driver seemed to stare too long. She pulled her babies close, one on her hip, the others waddling behind. Her heart pounded. She wasn't just fighting for custody or her marriage anymore. Now, she was defending her dignity before an entire country of strangers. Her phone rang. Her mother. Baby, don't look at those blogs. Just tell me you okay. Brooke didn't answer right away. She just sat on the floor, surrounded by her babies who didn't understand the chaos swirling outside. She finally whispered, I don't want them to grow up thinking their mom was a gold digger who cashed out. Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. Then keep standing. Show them who you are. Meanwhile, at the Wesley Tower, Louis slammed his fist on the boardroom table. Who leaked the documents? That custody offer wasn't even finalized. His legal team looked sheepish. No one gave a straight answer. But he already knew who had reason and motive. He stormed out and headed straight for the private floor of his parents' penthouse suite in the building. Celeste Wesley was sipping tea by the window, surrounded by orchids and soft jazz. "Mother," Louis said, jaw tight. "Did you leak it?" She looked up with faux innocence. "Leak what, darling?" "You know what. The custody arrangement, the offer, the bribe." Celeste set her cup down with care. That wasn't a bribe. It was an opportunity for her to take care of herself without dragging this family through scandal. She could have spared you, spared the company, spared... "She's my wife," Louis roared. "And you're my son," Celeste snapped, standing to her full height. "I built this legacy with your father. You don't get to throw it all away for a woman who's too proud to walk away with dignity." Louis stepped back, visibly shaken. He had come prepared for war, but this was family. This was blood, and he realized in that moment, his mother didn't just fear scandal. She feared Brooke, because Brooke represented something she could never control. "You've made your choice," Celeste said coldly. "I'll make mine." The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Brooke hadn't planned to speak out, but silence, she realized, could be just as loud. She sat in her living room, no filters, no makeup, just a single camera pointed at her. "Hi, I'm Brooke Carter Wesley," she said softly. "And yes, I'm the woman people are talking about this week, but I'm also a mother of 3 incredible children, and I wasn't offered money. I was told to walk away from my babies, to vanish quietly, and I said no." She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just told the truth, in her calm, honest voice. "I didn't marry my husband for money. I married him when he wasn't even sure what kind of man he wanted to be. We built something, and now, because I didn't want to play by their rules, I'm being painted as greedy. But I was never for sale." Within hours, the video caught fire. Hashtags like Brooke were never for sale and dignity over dollars trended nationwide. Women flooded her comments, sharing their own stories of being silenced, dismissed, or forced to choose between pride and peace. Brooke sat quietly that night, watching the numbers rise. She wasn't after fame, but maybe, just maybe, her truth could give someone else the courage to stand too. And somewhere in his penthouse, Louis watched the video on repeat, tears streaming down his face. He had failed her once. He didn't intend to do it again. It was a Wednesday morning when Louis showed up outside her apartment. No suit, no driver, just him. Brooke answered the door with cautious eyes, hair in a messy bun, wearing a faded T-shirt with one of the Triplets' teething rings still looped around her wrist. He didn't ask to come in. "I don't deserve to be let in," he said, hands in his pockets. "But I needed to tell you, I didn't leak the story, and I didn't approve the offer." Brooke's voice was steady. "But you didn't stop it either." He nodded, guilt pressing heavy on his shoulders. "You're right." A long silence followed, the kind that holds history, heartbreak, and hope, all at once. Louis finally looked her in the eye. "If you still want to walk away, I won't stop you. No more lawyers, no more pressure. But if there's even a small part of you that wants to try again, I'll fight every day to deserve that chance." Brooke studied him. Not the CEO, not the billionaire. Just the man, the father of her children. The one who once kissed her forehead in the rain and whispered dreams into her ear before they had anything. She didn't give him an answer that day. But she didn't close the door either. Instead, she stepped aside and said softly, "You can come in. But the babies just went down for a nap. Don't wake them." Louis smiled faintly, eyes glossy. "Got it." Quiet steps. They sat on the couch in silence, the kind that heals. The kind that says, maybe love still lives here. The apartment wasn't much, at least not by the Wesley standards Brooke had grown used to. No skyline views, no chandeliered dining rooms, no imported Italian countertops. But the minute you walked in, you felt something the estate never had: warmth. There were baby fingerprints on the lower half of the walls, art scribbles framed with dollar store magnets, and a worn-out couch that had somehow become a trampoline during the Triplets' daily 3 p.m. energy burst. Brooke had started over, not just physically, but intentionally. She'd worked with a local contractor to childproof the entire apartment, then added bright colors, soft rugs, and hand-sewn curtains that her grandmother helped her stitch over weekend visits. Every corner of the home was designed with one purpose: safety and joy. The Triplets had their own room, 3 tiny beds side by side, each with a custom nameplate: Nova, Luca, and Blair. A mobile spun over the center of the room with stars and soft clouds, and when the light hit it just right in the morning, Brooke swore it looked like hope dancing across the walls. There was a reading nook with beanbags and tiny shelves filled with donated picture books. Brooke didn't have everything, but she had what mattered. And each night, when she tucked them in and kissed 3 foreheads with "Mummy loves you more than chocolate cake," she knew she hadn't lost anything. She'd simply made space for something better. Not everyone could say they built a home from courage, but she could. The first time Louis came to Brooke's mother's house after everything went public, he brought 2 things: a store-bought pecan pie and an apology. He had expected icy glares at best, but Brooke's mom opened the door with a quiet nod and said, "Hope you know how to wash your own plate, 'cause I'm too old to be spoiling grown men." That night, he ate on a foldable chair at the corner of the table while the Triplets squealed and smeared mashed potatoes on everything in reach. Brooke's cousin played the guitar after dessert, and her uncle told a story so wild even the toddlers stopped to listen. Louis had never laughed like that. Not in years. Maybe not ever. It became a pattern. Sunday after Sunday he showed up, not in designer loafers, not chauffeured, not trying to prove anything. Just a man bringing groceries, folding laundry, helping carry the kids' toys to the car. He learned to grill with Brooke's uncles. He asked her aunt to teach him how to season catfish right. He sat on the porch with her mom after dinner, both of them rocking slowly, watching the kids play tag under the streetlight. Brooke didn't forgive everything overnight, but she saw something change. He was present, not perfect, but real. Not the Louis from boardrooms or press releases, but the man who stayed late to help clean up spaghetti noodles off the floor because Blair thought they were funny projectiles. And in those little, consistent acts, healing began. The phone call came on a Thursday morning. It wasn't Celeste Wesley's assistant. It was Celeste herself. "I'd like to discuss future arrangements regarding the children," she said formally. No pleasantries, no emotion. Brooke didn't flinch. "We can arrange supervised visits once a month. In neutral locations." There was a pause. "You don't think the children should be familiar with the family estate?" Brooke's tone remained level. "I think familiarity and safety are not the same thing." Another pause. Then Celeste said, "You're making a mistake." Brooke closed her eyes, took a breath, and responded with grace born from fire. "No, I made that mistake when I believed marrying into your family meant becoming silent. But I'm not silent anymore. That was the end of it." She didn't slam the phone. She didn't cry. She simply made a note in her calendar to follow up with the court-appointed mediator. From that day on, everything was documented. Schedules, locations, handovers. Celeste's influence didn't reach into this new world Brooke had carved out. Not anymore. Louis never argued when Brooke set boundaries. In fact, he respected them. When the Wesleys tried to organize a gala fundraiser and include the Triplets for photo ops, Brooke declined on their behalf. "They're not props for your redemption arc," she told the PR coordinator with a polite smile. Her children would grow up knowing both their parents, but not at the expense of their mother's peace. Brooke's power came not from yelling, but from deciding who had access to her life and who no longer did. It started with an email. Short, formal. Subject: "We saw your story. Would you consider leading a new program?" At first, Brooke thought it was spam. She almost deleted it. But the sender was real. The chief of pediatrics at Hamilton Grace Medical Center, a respected regional hospital known for its progressive neonatal research and maternal care outreach. They had followed her story online, watched her viral video, and dug into her background, quietly, respectfully. They were impressed with her clinical work, her passion for underserved mothers, and her vision. "We're launching a new neonatal program for vulnerable and at-risk infants, and need someone who understands medicine and people," the offer letter read. "We believe you are uniquely qualified." Brooke stared at the screen for a long time. She hadn't stepped into a hospital setting since before the triplets were born. She'd set that part of herself aside, not because she wasn't capable, but because life had pulled her in another direction. Now, life was offering something back. She printed out the letter and sat with her mother at the kitchen table. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I thought I gave up my career for my family." Her mother smiled gently. "Maybe you were never giving it up. Maybe you were just getting ready to lead it differently." Brooke accepted the offer 2 weeks later, her first act as director, implementing a Mothers in Medicine mentorship program, connecting young mothers returning to clinical work with flexible options, mental health support, and affordable childcare partnerships. This time, Brooke wasn't working to prove herself to anyone. She was simply walking in her calling. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like every part of her mother, wife, daughter, doctor had a place at the table. The air inside the Wesley Enterprises boardroom felt colder than usual. What once had been a sanctuary of stoic power and inherited legacy had now become a pressure cooker of whispered doubts and fragmented trust. The scandal hadn't just touched the outer walls of the empire, it had bled through the marble halls, staining the image the Wesley name had carefully curated over generations. The press had a field day with headlines: $4 million silence, heir's wife rejects payout, exposes family secrets, Wesley matriarch's control challenged by former daughter-in-law. Investors were jittery, stakeholders started requesting more frequent audits, and the board, usually a tight circle of loyalists handpicked by Celeste herself, began to murmur among themselves during quarterly meetings. Some had grandchildren now, daughters and nieces who asked over dinner, "Did you really try to buy her silence?" It wasn't just a PR mess, it was an ethical bombshell. "Are we still sure keeping everything in-house is the way forward?" murmured one board member during the spring review. "The public isn't buying the narrative anymore." Celeste sat stiffly at the head of the long mahogany table, her pearls perfectly aligned, but her face unreadable. Louis was quiet, sitting several seats down, not removed, but no longer centered. His eyes remained fixed on the numbers, but his mind was elsewhere. It was clear the traditional methods of containment were no longer working. The board didn't come out and say it, but the message was understood. The Wesley legacy could not survive under the old regime's shadows. They needed a new story, a cleaner one, a bridge between power and conscience. And without realizing it, the board began looking not just at Louis, but at Brooke, not because of her name, but because of her example. The invitation read simply, "An evening of light, supporting maternal and infant health across communities." Hosted by Dr. Brooke Carter and Mr. Louis Wesley. No family crest, no mention of estates or bloodlines. Just the names of two people who had weathered a storm and chose to turn their pain into purpose. Brooke stood at the top of the ballroom staircase that night, wearing an emerald green dress that caught the soft glow of every chandelier. Her hair framed her face like a crown of resilience, and her eyes scanned the room, not for approval, but with calm confidence. Louis stood beside her, dressed in classic black. But unlike galas of the past, he didn't command attention. He mirrored it, offering quiet strength while the spotlight shifted. This wasn't Celeste's kind of gala. There were no media exclusives, no velvet rope for the elite. Instead, the guest list included nurses, community organizers, school teachers, and women who had given birth in underfunded hospitals with no access to proper care. Brooke had chosen every detail. The floral arrangements were donated by local mothers who participated in therapy through floral design. The art on the walls showcased the work of teenage moms from the mentorship program. Brooke recently launched. And the menu? Cooked and served by graduates from a culinary reintegration program for formerly incarcerated women. Midway through the evening, Brooke took the stage. Not with a teleprompter or prepared PR script. Just truth. "I was once told that silence was safer than speaking up," she began. "That money could fix what dignity demanded, but the truth is, legacies don't just come from what we inherit. They come from what we build when no one's watching." The room went still. She spoke not about the Wesley family, but about every mother who ever chose her children over her reputation. Every woman who built again after being broken. Every person who was offered a price tag in exchange for their silence and chose to speak anyway. When she stepped down, the applause wasn't loud. It was long. People weren't just clapping for a speech. They were honoring the moment a woman took her story back. And Louis? He clapped with both hands. Not for the benefit of the cameras, but for the woman who taught him what legacy really meant. Life at home didn't pause just because the world was watching. Nova had recently discovered glitter glue and believed everything from the dog's ears to her baby brother's socks needed sparkle. Luca had an obsession with opening every box that entered the house. Deliveries, cereal, shoeboxes, it didn't matter. If it had tape on it, it was fair game. And Blair? She had taken a liking to hiding the TV remote in different places every day, like it was a family-wide scavenger hunt. But amid the small chaos were threads of joy that wove the family together tighter than any news headline ever could. Each morning began with a race. Who could hug Mummy first? Most days it ended in a triple pile-up on her knees while she laughed, trying to pour orange juice with one hand. Brooke had a system for school drop-offs, snack prep, and coloring assignments on the fridge. But she also made space for dance parties, late-night lullabies, and bedtime prayers whispered with kisses. One Saturday morning, Louis joined a parent-child yoga class with the Triplets. By the end of the first 5 minutes, Nova was balancing on his back. Luca was giggling under the instructor's table, and Blair had decided Downward Dog was boring. But Louis didn't complain. He just looked at Brooke across the studio, laughing at their mess of a mat, and whispered, "This is the boardroom that matters." The Triplets didn't understand inheritance or headlines, but they knew love. They knew their mommy didn't hide her smiles anymore. They knew their daddy came home more, not with briefcases but with snacks and bedtime stories. They didn't have a last name that weighed on them. They had a home that carried them. The letter came folded in crisp white paper with gold trim. No return address, just embossed initials at the top, CW. Celeste Wesley didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg. She simply asked if Brooke would consider attending a private family dinner. To reopen lines of civility for the sake of the children's future. Brooke read it twice. Then again, she didn't feel anger. Not anymore. She felt nothing. She didn't need revenge. She had already won something greater. Still, she agreed to attend. Louis drove her, and when she walked into the grand dining room of the estate she once lived in, nothing had changed. Not the furniture, not the scent of old wood and heirloom roses. But Brooke had changed. Celeste stood. "Thank you for coming." Brooke nodded. For the children. Dinner was civil, if awkward. The table was full, but the connection was thin. Still, Brooke listened respectfully. She didn't interrupt. She didn't raise her voice. She answered questions about the Triplets with grace, shared some updates on her hospital program, and even responded warmly when Louis's younger cousin asked about volunteering. After dessert, Celeste pulled her aside. "I see now," she said softly. "You weren't a threat to our legacy. You were the lesson we refused to learn." Brooke met her gaze and replied with calm certainty. "Legacy isn't built on control. It's built on truth, kindness, and the ability to admit when you've been wrong. There was nothing more to prove, no mic to drop, no final blow to deliver." Brooke didn't walk out of the estate in triumph. She walked out in peace. And that was her ultimate victory. 3 years passed like a blink and a lifetime at the same time. Brooke often laughed at how motherhood tricked her perception of time. Some days felt like marathons, yet Somehow her babies had transformed into tiny humans with entire personalities wrapped up in small bodies. The triplets were officially toddlers now, loud, curious, confident toddlers. Nova, the unspoken leader, marched around the house with a spark in her walk and questions spilling out of her mouth every minute. She wanted to know why the sky changed colors, why people cried when they were happy, why shoes had to match. She was bold but gentle, a mix of her mother's fire and her father's quiet intensity. Luca, the explorer, would wander through every room with a toy in his hand and wonder in his eyes. He loved opening drawers, examining gears, and taking things apart just to hand them to Brooke and say, "Fix it, Mommy." He had a laugh that could erase the worst stress of her day. And Blair, sweet Blair, was the snuggler. She always carried a blanket on her shoulder, always wanted to be held, always climbed onto Louis's lap during movie nights. She would press her forehead against Brooke's chest whenever she felt nervous, grounding herself in the presence that had become her anchor. Motherhood was still chaotic. Spills, tantrums, sticky fingers, toddlers negotiating like amateur lawyers, but it was beautiful. Their home sounded like childhood. Morning giggles, tiny feet pattering through the hallway, alphabet songs sung off-key, bedtime prayers whispered through sleepy lips. Brooke had once wondered if she could rebuild life from the rubble left by betrayal, pressure, and public judgment. Now she had proof. She didn't just rebuild. She created something new, something stable, warm, and joyful. A family not defined by a last name or wealth, but by love and intention. And the triplets, in their own silly, wonderful ways, were the daily reminders that she had made the right decisions, even when those decisions had cost her comfort. The launch day arrived with soft sunlight and a crowd gathered inside a renovated community center on the south side of town. A banner hung above the entrance, painted in deep navy and gold, the Brooke Carter Foundation for Mothers, Infants, and Families in Need. People clapped as Brooke took the stage, but she didn't bask in applause. She held the microphone with steady hands, dressed in a simple cream blazer, her curls pinned behind her ears. "Today isn't about me," she began. "It's about the women who stood alone in delivery rooms, the mothers who left hospitals without resources, the parents who chose love even when they had nothing else to give." Her voice was smooth, confident, no nerves, no self-doubt. She had earned this moment. Her foundation didn't appear overnight. It grew from her work in the neonatal program, the relationships she built with families, and the countless late-night talks with her grandmother about purpose and calling. The mission was clear: provide maternal health support, fund neonatal equipment for under-resourced clinics, offer mental health services for new mothers, create emergency grants for single parents, and develop mentorship programs for young women entering the medical field. The applause after her speech wasn't explosive, it was heartfelt, the kind of clapping that comes from people who feel seen. Journalists asked, "Why your name, not the Wesley name?" Brooke smiled gently. "Because this legacy began with my story, and I want women to know they don't need anyone's name to make an impact." Louis stood in the back holding Blair, watching her with pride blooming across his face. He wasn't the spotlight today. He didn't need to be. This was her arena now, her stage, her name, and she stood on it without shaking. A week after the foundation launch, Louis made an announcement that sent shockwaves through his company and quiet smiles through Brooke's family. He walked into a press briefing wearing a soft grey suit and said into the microphone, "I'm taking a 6-month parental leave to support my children and partner as she expands vital programs for families across our state." Reporters blinked in confusion. Corporate America wasn't accustomed to billionaires stepping back for diapers and daycare recitals. But Louis wasn't the same man from years ago. He had spent months learning how to braid Nova's hair, how to calm Luca during meltdowns, how to rock Blair to sleep even when she clung to his shirt like a koala. He knew the names of their favorite bedtime books now, knew how to make their pancake shapes just right, knew how to put family first, not simply as a slogan, but as a lived truth. Brooke wasn't surprised. He had shown up consistently, without excuses, without pressure. But she was touched. "Are you sure?" she asked that evening as he packed up his office laptop and placed it in a drawer. Yes, he said, your vision matters. And I want our kids to see that leadership isn't just about money or titles, it's about presence. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it had evolved, no longer built on expectation or pressure, but on partnership. Louis spent mornings helping Brooke organize foundation grant proposals, afternoons volunteering at the community health center, evenings reading books with the triplets sprawled across his lap like tiny puppies. He wasn't being praised for stepping up. He was simply doing what should always have been done, standing beside his wife instead of ahead of her. It started with a whisper, a secret shared between Brooke's mother, her grandmother, and Louis. Brooke had spent so long fighting storms that she hardly noticed her loved ones planning sunshine. One Sunday afternoon, Louis asked Brooke to take a walk through the community garden behind her foundation center. She agreed, thinking it was just another calm moment to catch her breath. But when she turned the corner, she stopped. Rows of soft white flowers lined the walkway. String lights hung from branches. A small arch stood in the center, wrapped in greenery and golden ribbons. Her family was there, all of them. Her friends, her co-workers, the triplets in matching cream outfits, holding baskets of petals, and Louis, standing under the arch, heart in his eyes. Brooke covered her mouth with her hand. What is this? Her mother stepped forward, smiling. A do-over, baby. A wedding that honors who you are, not who they wanted you to be. Brooke's first wedding had been in the Wesley estate. Cold, formal, curated. She had felt watched, not celebrated. That day, she had walked down the aisle in silence. Today, she walked toward love. Louis held out his hand. Brooke Carter Wesley, he said gently, if you'll allow me, I want to spend the rest of my life honoring the woman who taught me what real family means. Brooke swallowed tears. On my terms this time. On your terms, he echoed. Her grandmother officiated the ceremony with humor, warmth, and a few happy tears. The triplets danced in circles around them, tossing petals that mostly landed on themselves. Brooke's cousins recorded everything, cheering as if she were the star of a movie. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't a display. It was heartfelt. It was free. It was hers. Louis kissed her under the arch while their children wrapped their arms around their legs, giggling. Brooke closed her eyes, savoring the moment. For the first time since marrying into a powerful name, she didn't feel overshadowed. She felt chosen. Not because of expectation, not because of image, but because her story, her truth, had shaped a family rooted in love, not legacy. A year had passed since Brooke Carter turned down the $4 million that the Wesley family offered her in exchange for walking away from her children. A year since she reclaimed her identity and chose to live, not under the shadow of power, but beside it, as her own woman. Now, standing behind the polished podium of a sold-out women's leadership summit in Philadelphia, Brooke glanced briefly at her note cards, then set them aside. The room was filled with CEOs, young entrepreneurs, mothers, teachers, and rising changemakers, all waiting. Not for a lecture, but a story. Her story. She adjusted her mic and smiled softly. They tried to buy my silence, tried to tell me I was disposable because I wasn't one of them. But what they didn't understand, she paused, was that I was never for sale. Gasps turned into applause. She continued. There was a time I thought having a wealthy last name meant security, that a big house and dinner parties meant love. But love doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't make your children a bargaining chip. And it definitely doesn't come with a price tag. Brooke shared pieces of her journey. From the hospital floor where she birthed her triplets alone, to the courtroom where she stood her ground, to the family dinners she now hosted, where laughter filled the air instead of tension. But the biggest shift, she said, her voice tightening, was when I realized I wasn't just someone's wife. I was someone's entire world, 3 times over. I was their mother. I was enough. The crowd stood in ovation, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. With grace, not bitterness. Power, not ego. Backstage, Louis waited with the triplets, each holding a tiny bouquet. She didn't just speak, he whispered to the twins, pride flooding his face. She lit up the whole room. After the summit, Brooke sat for a moderated fireside chat streamed to over 300,000 virtual viewers. The moderator leaned in, curious. "What made you speak up now?" Brooke smiled gently. "Because silence protects the people who least deserve it." Her tone was calm, not vindictive, not angry, just true. "I didn't come here today to bash a last name. I came to remind women that we are more than how others label us. Single mom, gold digger, outsider. I was all those things in their eyes. But I knew who I was in the eyes of my children." She shared the moment the Wesley matriarch offered her the money. She didn't offer that money out of kindness. It was control, dignity disguised as a deal. And I almost said yes. Because when you've been made to feel small long enough, even crumbs start to look like a meal. That line alone hit hard. But I said no, because my children deserve a legacy rooted in truth, not transaction. Questions flooded in from viewers, many asking how she forgave Louis, others asking how she didn't walk away when she had every reason to. "I forgave him because he chose differently the second time," she said. "He didn't just show up with flowers, he showed up with actions. He showed up for night feedings, therapy, my dreams. He stepped down from board meetings to show up at ballet practice." "That's love." The moderator nodded. "You're redefining strength." Brooke's eyes softened. "No, I'm just reminding women, especially women like me, that our stories matter. That resilience is not about how long you endure, but about when you finally say, enough." At home that evening, the triplets sat on the living room floor, markers and glitter everywhere. The twins argued over which color to use, while little Zion clung to the purple crayon like it was currency. Brooke sat on the couch, still in her summit dress, hair pinned, heels off, heart full. "What are you all drawing?" she asked, sipping her tea. "A family tree," Zion shouted, showing off a scribble of stick figures. "You're at the top," she smiled. "Am I now?" Nova, ever the organizer, pointed. "Here's Daddy, here's us. But you go in the middle because everything starts with you." Brooke blinked, just for a second, not because she was tired, but because their words hit deeper than applause ever could. Louis walked in, dropping his keys on the table. "Did I just get demoted on the tree?" Brooke laughed. "Apparently, I'm the root system now." He bent down, kissing her temple. "That tracks." The kids ran to him, tugging him into their chaos. Glitter spilled. Crayons snapped, and Brooke just watched, not for control, but for joy. The home felt lived in, loud, joyful, and hers. She framed the family tree that night and hung it above the fireplace. It wasn't symmetrical. The spelling was all wrong. But in the center, bold and proud, was her name. Mommy Brooke. It was the only title that ever really mattered. Weeks later, Brooke stood by the classroom door of a local community center, where she'd been asked to speak to young teen moms. One girl raised her hand, tears brimming. "Do you think it's too late for people like me to build a good life?" Brooke didn't hesitate. "No, baby, because you don't need to marry power. You just need to remember you were born with it." She hugged the girl and walked out into the afternoon sun, triplets waiting in the car, snacks in hand, Louis in the passenger seat already fussing with the car seats. The world didn't bow at her feet, but she didn't need it to. She had her name back, her peace, her power, and a life no money could ever buy.